Well, thank you so much for staying with the morning show. And just last month, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that the ruling party would be supporting an amendment to the Constitution to make land expropriation without compensation legal. Now, he further said that it had become very clear that the people wanted expropriation without compensation to become more explicit in the Constitution and to go beyond the current constitutional provisions for expropriation in the public interest. Now, AfriForum is a civil rights organization that highly disapproves of land expropriation, and in its investigations it claims to be in possession of a list of farms identified by government as targets for expropriation. Well, Ernst, the Deputy CEO of AfriForum, joins us to give us more clarity and details regarding this particular list. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Awesome.
Mr. Roets, let's kick this off, I think, and get straight in. From AfriForum's perspective, maybe we need a definition of what you guys feel land expropriation is, and if you could follow that up with what your perspective of the consequences of land expropriation would be, particularly within our context of what's happening in the country at the moment.
Yes, well, expropriation without compensation is essentially about taking the property that people legally own and not compensating them or paying them for it, which is why we believe that it is a form of theft.
Okay.
We believe that there are other things that could be done or should be done to address land reform, but simply taking people's property is not going to work, because it has been tried repeatedly in the world, and every single time it has been tried, it has failed. So we really need to look at a method or a measure according to which people's property rights are protected, because that's a prerequisite if you want to have economic growth.
Yeah. Now, we understand that you have a particular a list of farms that have been identified. It's 195 in total, and you have actually published this list to say that this is the list that the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development and Land Reform, have actually identified as the first basis of expropriating. Where did you get the list, and is that list credible?
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily a first property that will be targeted first. The list is being circulated within the Department of Land Reform, and the heading of the document is Proposed Expropriation Test Cases. So we do not know what the status of the document is, but the fact of the matter is that the department have said, the Minister of Land Reform in particular said a few weeks or a few months ago that they have identified the properties that they want to expropriate first, and then she said, we don't want those people to know, because we don't want them to prepare for a legal challenge. And so recently we have obtained this list, which, as I said, is being circulated within the department, and we believe it's in the interest of the people whose names are on that list to know that their names are on.
But we know that the department has denied this particular list as being credible.
Yes, well, the department has been flip-flopping so many times. So initially they said they have a list, they don't want the people to know. Then the ANC said that there is a list, the National Executive Committee of the ANC said there is a list, and there are 139 properties or 139 cases on the list. Then the department said, yes, we do have a list, but we don't want to make it public because we want to inform the people first. Now, so the list has been published, now they say, no, there's never been a list all along. So they've had, just in the last 2 months, they have publicly had at least 3 different positions on the existence of a list.
So let's pretend then that they confirm and we find that the list is verified and is accurate. What is AfriForum then hoping to achieve by publishing the list?
Yes. Well, the first thing is to be able to prepare for a legal challenge. So we've been speaking with the people who are on the list over the last 2 days, and to get as much information as we can about those properties, about the histories of those properties. Also, we're trying to get as much information as we can regarding the department's position. So one of the things we want to do is to get a legal interdict. If the department says those properties will not be targeted, we want them to be able to declare so in terms of, and have provide the authenticity of a court order to that. So for them to say, we are not going to target any one of these properties. So far, they are not prepared to say that. If they are going to target those properties, then we need to prepare for a legal action. And that would depend on the facts and the circumstances of each case.
Have you engaged with the Institute of Race Relations regarding this particular document?
No, we haven't engaged with
Because I read an article, the reason I'm asking is because I read an article whereby the Institute of Race Relations, of course, came out saying that they believe that the document could be legit, and the department, on the other hand, profusely denying it. But not only the department, even I think about 2 of the farm owners saying that they did not wish to even have that list circulated because now they feel exposed, and they feel now even furthermore targeted, and as part of the conversation, which might be more conflict, which they didn't anticipate.
Yeah, I spoke with both of those 2, and after our conversation it was clear that they were initially very angry. Well, everyone was angry about the list, including those 2 farmers, and we have had a discussion, and they said to me that they understand the point, that the problem here is not the fact that AfriForum published the list. The problem is the fact that their names are on the list in the first place.
So are you basically saying that the government is then acting maliciously in this case? Is that they've spoken about a list, and now that the list has surfaced, they are in absolute denial of the list, and therefore there's obviously malicious intent to withhold that information?
Yes, I think they are clearly malicious, and part of the reason why I'm saying that, other than what I've said so far, is they've been talking publicly about the fact that they are preparing for a test case, or for test cases. Now, when you talk about a test case, what that essentially means is you want to take a particular case out of many, to go to court, to win, to set a legal precedent so that you can use that judgment to apply to other cases. So you can only talk about a test case if you have a list. And then you have to go through the list and say, okay, based on these, for example, 100 or 190 cases, which of these do we think in which of these would our case or our argument be the strongest for expropriation without compensation? Let's target that one and go to court. That's what it means when you say you want to have a test case. You cannot talk about a test case if you don't have a list. And now they're saying, no, we've never had a list in the first place. They've publicly been talking about the existence of a list. And they've publicly been talking about the fact that they don't want people to know that their properties are on that list.
I think we need to put it on record that, of course, the Morning Show has reached out to the Department of Agriculture and Land Reform, of course, to be on the show, to also have a right to reply, and we have not heard from them after numerous follow-ups. But I would like to know from the farmers themselves, at this particular point, where do they stand in terms of what action they would like to take?
Yes, so we are preparing for legal action. We had a meeting with our legal team yesterday, based on the information that we were able to gather from the farmers. They are all, each of them would, in a certain sense, they're all in the same boat because their properties have been identified. But in a certain sense, they each have a unique situation because of the history of that particular farm. Some of those cases have not had land claims on the properties. There are some cases where the cases are very interesting because there are mineral rights involved and so forth. So what we want to do, and we've discussed it with the people whose names are on the list, is to have a joint legal strategy. We don't think that everyone should try to take on the state by him or herself. So we will also be preparing for a test case. In other words, to go through the list and to see which case can we identify to take to court if necessary, to fight this thing, and to force the government to issue a statement that not one of those properties would be targeted.
I mean, I feel like, and we'll conclude our conversation. I think we'll come back to the list. But I think what's very interesting for me is the way you've contextualized all of it. And there's a couple of points that I want to go back to. So you very clearly stated that you believe that land expropriation without compensation is theft, which I think in a lot of instances we'll be forced to agree based on the current law. What is your opinion then in terms of what must happen to the original owners of that land? So this conversation comes about obviously based on colonialism and the way the land was received in the first place. So the land may be legally owned now, but obviously there are generations of impoverishment that have suffered due to this land being taken. What is your perspective in terms of what must be done? Because people are not fighting for no reason. So I understand that we are here to protect the farmers, but what is your suggestion then for those that are still in an impoverished situation, dealing with generations of poverty, because land, as we know, is the basis and the foundation for any kind of building of wealth?
Yes, I think you answered to an extent already in your question when you referred to how was the land received in the first place. So I think that's the point. You can be, unless your argument is that if you are white, it's not possible to be a legitimate owner of property, you have to concede that there can be cases where you simply don't have any moral claim to expropriate without compensation if the owner is white, because he might have received, or he might own that property legitimately. And I think the majority of white property owners do own their property legitimately. But the question then is, how do we address historical injustices?
That's my point.
Yeah, because there were dispossessions. That's a fact. And the point there is you need to look at the history of a particular piece of land. If there's a particular farm on the list, for example, you need to go and look what happened on that farm. Were there a community living there that were dispossessed? If so, then it's an issue of restitution. It's not an issue of expropriation, or it's not even an issue of redistribution. And then there should be a proper study done about the history, and if that's true, that people were dispossessed, then that has to be corrected. But then again, we also know that 93% of people who qualify for restitution, in other words, who file land claims, 93% of them say they would rather want money than land.
Yeah.
So we need to consider that as well. But I think the point is looking at the history of a particular piece of land, as opposed to saying, if you are white, you are not supposed to be the owner of property.
Yeah. And I think we asked this question because we've seen AfriForum being in the media numerous times, also being attacked by political parties such as the Economic Freedom Fighters, particularly on the organization's stance on history with its colonization, as well as how you view, or rather how your CEO has made comments with regards to apartheid. Yes. I want to take you to a particular comment that he made back in May, where, of course, he mentioned that, and I quote, that there were never mass killings of people under apartheid, as we saw under communism when the Jews were killed.
Yes.
Now, when you speak about the concept of apartheid, what comes to my mind is mass killings, because we saw it with the Sharpeville mass killings, with the 1976 June youth uprisings, whereby young people were, of course, killed under the hands of the apartheid regime. Do those views represent AfriForum or just your CEO, just especially on your perspective as an organization with regards to South Africa's history?
Yes. Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Firstly, he's right when he says that there were no mass killings that were similar to that under communism, because what he was referring to is under communism, which is a policy that, or an ideology that has never been declared a crime against humanity. People were rounded up and there were mass graves, and whole families had to stand in line, and they were then just shot dead. They were thrown into ovens and so forth. Yes, there were killings, there were mass killings in South Africa, but that was during political riots. And I'm not trying to justify it, I'm saying the context is different. And I think the point there is not to deny that apartheid, AfriForum has never ever taken a stance to defend apartheid, and we never would, because apartheid was a system under which people's dignity was violated. It was a system of state-driven social engineering, and it should be criticized on many, many levels. The point, and that's the point that Kali Cleo was making, is that there's no consistency in terms of when something is a crime against humanity. So the bar is set at a particular level to declare apartheid a crime against humanity, while 100 million people have been murdered under communism, for example, and that is an ideology that is held by the ruling party in South Africa. So we need to criticize apartheid, but we need to be consistent, and we need to put everyone under the same.
So you're saying that apartheid was not a crime against humanity?
The point is that the definition of a crime against humanity is not being applied consistently. It was declared a crime against humanity, but there was a lot of politics regarding the declaring of apartheid a crime against humanity. Yes, it was wrong, and yes, it was a system that had to change. We're not defending the system. We're simply saying that there's a set of rules that counts for one, and there's a completely different set of rules that counts for the other. That's what the whole argument about apartheid and crime against humanity, that's what the point was.
But you obviously understand then that, from the public's perspective, and especially those that were oppressed under apartheid, all we hear is somebody going, it wasn't that bad, get over it. I'm just saying, for me, it just felt like that there could have been more consideration to the tact in which those messages were brought across and those comparisons were drawn. When you're comparing two tragedies, as somebody who didn't suffer under either of them, the integrity of your argument is immediately dampened.
Yes, but there's a counter-argument. So if you say to me apartheid was a policy of genocide, which it wasn't, or if you say apartheid was a policy of slavery, which it wasn't, how do I respond to that without saying it wasn't that bad? It was bad, it was horrible, but it wasn't what you say it was. Apartheid wasn't a system where people were rounded up and thrown into ovens. That's what it is said to be today. So we need to put that context.
But I feel that they could, and this is where the spiral would go, because I feel that there are many arguments to support to say that it was worse than those.
Right.
Because
apartheid was worse than not.
There are many arguments that could suggest the argument that my parents, Tumelo's parents, our families are still suffering.
You know what happened in Nazism?
I'm not saying that it was worse than us, but that's why we are not drawing the comparison. What we are saying,
we are responding to the comparison.
But what we are saying is, you don't put a plaster on somebody's wound and say at least it's not broken. You understand what I'm saying? So for me, to draw a comparison to somebody's pain, where there was death, there was death. The ongoing legacy of what apartheid has caused is something that is consistently denied. The ongoing legacy, when I go into social media and I see people going, come on, get over it, it's been 20 years, what is everybody still whining about?
Yeah.
And then I understand, and if anybody, for me, makes an ignorant statement like that and doesn't take into consideration what basic principles, like not allowing black people to own land in the country, what type of consequences those would have in terms of generational wealth.
That's not
and
true.
people being able to vote. Is it not true?
It's not true that black people were not allowed to own land. Did you read the Native Land Act? It said that there are certain areas where only black people are allowed to own land, and there are certain areas where only white people are allowed. You should criticize that. You shouldn't say black people were not allowed to own land, because that's something else.
Okay, then let me rephrase and say, apartheid government made it as difficult as possible for black people to own land. This is something that you can't deny.
That's also not true. Because there were areas, they expropriated white people in certain areas and said white people are not allowed to own property here. Only black people are allowed to own property here. That's not making it as difficult. I'm not defending the system. I'm simply saying our criticism must be historically accurate.
I agree, and we unfortunately are out of time, and I hope to be able to invite you guys back to continue this conversation. We love when it gets heated. We see your passion. And I feel like we'd like you guys to continue the conversation online. We're going to be back after our 7 a.m. news. We're going to try and touch on some of these conversations. We are going to our 6:30 headlines. And in fact, I've just been told we will continue the conversation after 6:30 because it's too good. Send us your voice notes to the number 0724116528. We would love to hear what you have to say.
Well, welcome back. We're still, of course, joined by Ernst, the Deputy CEO of AfriForum. We're talking about the list that they've circulated, namely of those farms as well as farmers who, of course, they allege have been targeted, rather, by the Department of Land Reform as well as Agriculture. We do know that they, of course, claim that the list has already been going on within the department. This, however, the department has denied, and we did invite them onto the show and offered them a right to reply, but unfortunately, they could not honor that invitation. We're going to bring it back, of course, to the news desk, and we did have, a heated, conversation with you, Ernst. But I want to bring it back also to the comparison that you made, to the dispossession or the expropriation of land, to that which you foresee to being similar to what happened with Zimbabwe, and how farmers, of course, could not sort of have that import and export trade with as far as farming is concerned.
Yes. Well, we're not saying that it is similar. We're saying it could potentially become similar, because there's been many examples across the world where expropriation of private property or tampering with property rights has led to a total economic collapse. We've seen that in Zimbabwe, in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Cambodia, we've seen in North Korea. So there's an overarching thread in all those cases, which was there was a tampering with property rights. Government became too involved with trade and commerce between individuals, and the economy collapsed. On the other hand, there are many examples of countries where countries were poverty-stricken and were able to rise out of it, and who are now some of the wealthiest countries in the world, like Singapore and Hong Kong and South Korea. And the overarching thread in all those countries are that property rights were protected and that government didn't intervene didn't try to micromanage. So there's the two scenarios. There's tamper with property rights, government over-regulation as opposed to protection of property rights and giving people freedom to compete. And the one scenario has always led to economic destruction. The other scenario has always led to economic boost and to a reduce in poverty. And we are now flirting with the one that we shouldn't be flirting with.
I think that just so that I'm on the record saying this, I agree. If you have a look historically, any case where it was done in an ungovernable way and processes weren't followed, the long-term effects on those countries' economies was devastating in most cases. I think that the point that I'm trying to make, and this is my frustration, and I don't pretend to be a political analyst, I don't pretend to be a politician, but what I am is a citizen of South Africa. And what I find is, in all of these cases, when you go and have a look back historically, it's the way these messages are communicated. I'm saying that I don't think that we are acknowledging how dangerous this threat is because we are not providing an alternative with the answer. So our argument, we go, no, currently there are white people that perhaps we could entertain an argument that land was not received under colonialism, and there is the flip side, but what we are not saying, what form of compensation is being offered. So for me, I feel like the conversation should go these are the consequences, these are the pros, these are the cons, but this is what is going to be done to level the playing field. Around the world, where we have the same arguments, if you read any article on generational wealth, if you read any article on the major differences between first world, third world, middle class around the world, property is the basis for all of those conversations. Bringing in conversations like there are certain white individuals who own their property legally, we can't argue that under the current law, but what I can argue is the value of properties that are owned by white South Africans versus the value of properties that even historically, as you said, were being able to be owned by black South Africans. Just the intrinsic value of the properties as a basis for an argument. I don't think there's an argument to say it's ever been fair. My question is, why are we not going, this is where the wrongs were, this is our suggestion to make it right, and this is where we feel compensation should happen? Well,
I think we should do that. We should say where were the wrongs and how do we fix them, because there were things that were clearly wrong that clearly has to be fixed. I think, however, that and this is from a practical perspective, nothing other than, it's not ideological or anything like that. I think the focus should not be on addressing inequality, the focus should be on addressing poverty and unemployment. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there was a recent study that came out that found that they compared over the last, I think, 100 or 200 years, different forms of government, right-wing and left-wing and conservative and capitalist, and what they found was nobody really knew how to address inequality. For example, under Cuba, which is a communist country, inequality increased under Fidel Castro. So we don't really know. Inequality is not a good thing, but we don't know how to fix it. Those who have claimed that they know what the solution is haven't been able to fix it. Those who have claimed that they know how to fix inequality have reduced the wealth of everyone, but increased inequality in the process. But I think we do know how to address poverty. We do know how to address unemployment. And that the first thing we need to do is look at the education system, and then we need to look at empowering people or making it possible or easier for people to be able to start businesses, to start employing people and so forth.
And I do know that we kind of have this conversation on more of a very high level in terms of government, what unions are saying about it, what your organization as AfriForum is saying about it. And you've also made, you know, the flirtatious comparison with Zimbabwe, where you're saying South Africa could potentially be the next Zimbabwe in terms of what happened there with them having sanctions and whatnot. But I think for me, and the point that I'm trying to get to is with regards to ordinary people. We're already seeing land grabs take place in South Africa. We've already seen even the economic freedom fighters say, if you spot land, take it, it is yours. We've already heard conversations around a civil war potentially even erupting, where people are saying, we're not going to wait for any section within the Constitution, we're not going to wait for government, we're definitely not going to wait for AfriForum to give us approval, or even the farmers. We're just going to go out there and we're going to take these lands and make the most of whatever we can. Are you not afraid of that happening in terms of land grabs, in as much as you are afraid in terms of what could happen economically to South Africa?
Yes, well, we are. I think the first thing to say about that is, fortunately, the people who are saying those things and who are doing those things are the radicals. They do not speak for and I'm talking about white and black people. The people whose voices you often hear the loudest are the people who are most to the fringe. So we know the majority of white people and black people in this country are not racist, but on the other hand, the Nazis were also a fringe group initially. The point is, well, I think we should also consider what is it that people really want, because, for example, 84% of land grabs are in urban areas. The entire focus currently is on farms, and we need to expropriate farms and rural land, but 84% of land claims of land grabs are in urban areas, 60% of land claims are in urban areas. There's a massive urbanization, more so among black people than among white people. There are many millions of people, especially black people in urban areas, who live on state-owned land, who want property rights, who want title deeds. So I think there could be a radical economic transformation by the government if they simply gave title deeds to the millions of people who are living on state-owned land, because then they would become bankable. But that's not happening. I think that's a major step that could be taken, and it's literally with the push of a button or the strike of a pen they can do that.
Ernst, I wanna thank you for your time, and I also applaud you on being big enough to come on the show. I think a lot of people kind of avoid this type of confrontation and this type of platform, so I do commend you on that. I feel like South Africa will weigh in on where they feel their opinion on your decisions, and what the risks are with the list that you sit with. So, you know, for you at home, just send us your opinions. Keep sending us your voice notes. Go on to, if you're on social media, on Twitter, please don't forget to use the hashtag #MorningShowSA, and we'd love to discuss and figure out, how do you feel about land expropriation without compensation? Are you ready? Do you fully understand the consequences? And are you getting yours back?